And hopefully all the new issue found is also against Spring 5. Otherwise, we'll have to go out to search for it.
We'll do a quick look in Sprint 5, and then we'll head over to just the defect list in general. Let's test this way. Okay, so I think we had a few things that we were monitoring. Right, so we had Volt 12. The good news is it looks like that got addressed. 411.
Chatting with Stefan right now. That is in progress. He's working on some other issues that are preventing completion. I don't have an ETA on it yet, but it's being worked.
Do we have a complete date?
That's what I say. Not an ETA yet. There's some missing issues. There's some issues with JSON, I guess, that have been resolved, but some missing REST paths, and he's working with Sergio on that.
Okay. So no dates. Alloc ID and Gemport ID selection and XPON handler. Any updates, Chip?
Yeah, I guess it helps if I turn off mute. Yeah, I can go ahead and look at the see what I can do about the last comment about the integration test. There's no other. I've already got a +1 on all the logic changes. So I think David added Steve to take a look at it as well. So and I'd be happy to follow up after, if we want to go ahead and submit it now, and I'll finish up the iTest work, or we can wait on trying to get that done today.
Okay.
Hey, Chip, this is Steve. I was on PTO for the last
okay.
Well,
yeah, I just saw that.
Half or so. So I just responded to David. I'll take a look, but depending on how big that is.
Yeah, it's just a couple lines.
Okay.
For the iTest stuff, the actual implementation is really small.
So is this integration test specific to this, or are we waiting on the integration tests that are being broken by Chameleon?
On both. So I have integration tests to actually test the features. So there's one comment out that they want me to try to go ahead and clean it up so you can run the integration test twice. So I have to add that actual work in here. You can run the integration test if you get the rest and the proxy to work. But if you update the newest code, Chameleon's not there anymore. So
okay.
So it's just run the integration test more than once that you can't run once yet.
Is Niren and Srisha, you guys want to say something?
Yeah, I was saying, like, on this change set, we put the comment about the iTest because we ran through them and we got the problem that. So once you fix it, that we can issue the +2 on that. Okay.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is the integration tests. One second. So the integration test should be done today, right? The feature-specific one?
Yes, if I can get it to work. It takes me about 2 hours to tear down everything I have right now to get back to where I can test just the individual test.
And then waiting on the other integration test. Okay. And then we've got Volta not able to send events, alarms to Kafka in clustered mode.
I still haven't tested that. Pretty sure you said you might be able to get tested or check that out. Were you able to look at that at all?
We tried on Friday. I mean, it was kind of a short day on Friday, but we ran into another issue with respect to some permissions and with the installer script. So we were trying to fix that and run it again because we wanted to start it afresh to see if there's any difference with the latest code. So hopefully today we'll retry it. We put in a workaround for that. So is the installer script work okay for everyone? Because we also run behind proxies, and so we have to do something more than everybody else, and that's why I keep asking this. When we ran the vinstaller, I don't think we saw that before. We had some cases where we needed sudo access, and we're trying to fix that in the installer first. And then hopefully today we can give it a try.
Okay, thanks.
But the problem you encounter is not a new bug, right? Or
well, we'll have to characterize it because, like I said, we run behind proxies, so we'd have to do something different or add more stuff to proxies. And I don't know if that's. It didn't seem like it was related to the proxies, but we just want to characterize it before we say it's a problem.
But is that, you said running behind a proxy, is that only for your lab setup, or everybody will do, you know, with a workaround they will encounter this?
I don't know how everybody runs, whether they use proxies or not, but the code that's in Voltha does not support proxies yet. I mean, we have to do additional changes to run behind proxies.
When you say run behind proxies, who's going through the proxy? Volta's going through a proxy to get to something?
Oh, there's lots of things that need proxies, HTTPS and HTTP and FTP proxies, not FTP, HTTP and HTTPS, and some of the protocols, like for example, Git needs to be changed to HTTPS. I mean, there's a lot of things that you have to deal with when you're running behind proxies. And I believe from looking at the Volta code base, it assumes direct connectivity to internet, and typically, at least our corporation doesn't allow that. So
Okay.
it's something that we take care of internally, but sometimes the problems are not related to it's common, everybody will face it, but we first characterize it before we say it's really a problem.
Yep, no, that makes sense. There shouldn't be an assumption of direct connect to the internet. That if there is an assumption there, we need to at least document that in Jira so that we can kill it, if not for this release, for another release.
Yeah, today we cannot. I mean, we can't take the existing code and use it behind proxies as is. We have to do additional changes.
Is that for the build or for the running?
It used to be for running as well, and that's what we're trying to fix using the vInstaller. You know, creating a mini internet sort of with the vInstaller. But yeah, definitely for the build, you need like everything that you fetch, everything that you build needs. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so what I heard was Surisha is going to retry it today, and hopefully we'll get an update. We're still waiting on this.
Well, I just wonder, because you mentioned, Srisha, you mentioned there's some changes or something like that. Would that be contribute back? I mean, what I'm saying is that the installer, is that everybody using the same installer, right? So it would be great what you found, and everybody. What I'm saying is that environment dependent. So if it is environment dependent, then how can we separate one case versus the other? David, am I saying something?
I mean, no, I get what you're saying. I mean, I'm trying to run through this in my mind. I mean, other than the install where you're pulling down images, or the build where you're pulling down images, I'm trying to think where in the heck any internet connection's happening.
Well, today when you go fetch the images from, the way the installer works is you have to first create a Voltha, running Voltha, and then you basically pull all the images into a Voltha VM, or it could be using Vagrant. That's what it uses today. And then goes and pulls all the images from the internet, from the Docker Hub, and wherever it needs to, from GitHub, wherever it needs to, right? And those are actually put into those are packaged into the vInstaller. So during that step, we need to change the make files to use the right env settings. And for us, we have changed it to use our proxy env settings, and it may not be the same for everybody. So we need to do it in a more generic fashion, but I don't know how, what is intended for Voltha. Is it supposed to be assuming direct connectivity to internet or not? It's not clear to me.
I mean, there's two phases here. Could you say during the build of Voltha, and what you're describing now as the building of the vInstaller, during that phase, it should, do we need internet connectivity? The answer is yes.
Yes.
Should we assume that has to be direct connect? No, we probably should parameterize it. So if there are proxy needs, we can adjust those.
Well, I brought this up before in the meeting, and I said that you better get one without proxies, and it's not that easy for big corporations. But that was the answer I got before. So.
No, I mean I get that. Okay, I mean the problem, and see, to me that's part of the build, and we need to solve that. And then so once we have the vInstaller build and you've installed Voltha on machines, the deployed machines, target machines, then Voltha doesn't need the internet connectivity, and that was what I was trying to resolve in my mind, where that boundary was.
That's right. It's while creating the installer, that's when we need internet connectivity. Yes.
But okay.
The build process, the Voltha build process today needs internet connectivity. I mean, of course, you're fetching everything from.
So essentially, what's happening is a bunch of Ansible scripts are running and everything else, and it's pulling down the required deb files, the required Docker images to essentially replicate the target environment. You run into real problems when you start talking about the Ubuntu deb files, which all of a sudden you have to have a mirror archive or a set of those deb files elsewhere.
I would assume if you want to bring everybody, if you want to bring the package to whatever lab, right? You don't bring the build, you bring the installer, right?
Yeah.
So
yes and no. I think people are going to bring both.
That's true. We bring the images. We don't bring the code. So,
I think for POC 3, people are going to bring the code because let's be honest, if they get to a point where something doesn't work.
I understand, but if something doesn't work, you build it in an offline, I guess, development environment, and you still bring. It has to look like you're taking. It has to look like close to production. So you still take the vInstall. You still build the vInstaller and take that and deploy the images. You don't really. I mean, that's how I understood. Unless something's changing.
That is my expectation too.
Yeah. What I can envision though, that is a rather long edit, compile, deploy cycle, and if every time you change code during POC, you have to run through that whole cycle, that slows the cycle down incredibly. So I can imagine there's going to be some debugging, some making sure things work, and then once things work, run through that cycle to make sure that everything goes through the installer. But for a single code change and line code change, I can't imagine when you got a time-bound POC to have to run through a cycle. It's going to take hours to get back to where to test that code.
Card and plain.
But there is no other way, David. I mean, I wish Sergio was on the call because he worked on this whole installer and deploying all these images on the Docker stack. The way it is done is you have to, through NSSH pull in all these images. You build the images elsewhere, you pull them into the installer, and then you deploy them as a part of the Docker stack deploy in the Swarm. You don't have the code on the production machine. You run them in production and not in development at AT&T POP3. That's my understanding.
Yeah, yes. The question is, when you get to POC3 and when we get to POC3, when you get to if there's a problem, let's assume there's a problem. I guess that's a safe assumption.
There is
It will be.
And we believe that problem's because of a code. It requires a code change, whether that code changes to an ONUS app, a control plane app, or Voltha code. There's two ways you can go about this. You can say, okay, we think this is a problem. Let's go off to our dev machine, edit the code, do as much unit testing as we can, build a V installer, then bring it back to lab and run the installer. And that process is going to take some significant time. I'll call it an hour and a half.
Yes,
right?
it does.
Or,
yes, definitely. Yeah.
Or you could say, okay, I've got a problem. Let me change the source code kind of live, if you will, to make sure that's really the real issue is resolved by that one code change. And then once I get that resolved live, then I can go through that long cycle because I know I've got the problem fixed. And then I can go through the installer. And that will, again, in a time-bound POC, take a shorter amount of time to get to a resolution while still including the, yes, this is how it would work in production. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but that's not how it is today. So you may want to talk to Sergio and put down the steps as to how you would do, how you would patch it.
So what's the
Well, here's Sergio.
Basically, what we're talking about is at the POC, at live. Well, there's two issues that we're talking about. One is when the V installer is being built, it requires today.
Yeah, but you don't build. No, hang on. So hang on. The V installer is not built at AT&T. It's built at the supplier site. You put it on a USB stick and you go and you run it there.
Okay.
So creating the installer is something that's done at the vendor site, right? That's normal. You have to create it's just like when you buy a product off a shelf with an installer, the vendor built the installer on their site and then shipped it as a working installer. So that's sort of a red herring. The actual installer itself, when it runs, doesn't require any access to anything but itself.
Okay. Right. So we'll separate the issue. Let's put AT&T aside now for right now. The first issue we were trying to tackle is today at the vendor site. When you install the V or build the V installer, direct internet access is assumed. And if a vendor has a corporate policy where direct internet access is not allowed, they go through proxies, firewalls, whatever, then the V installer does not build off the shelf.
It can, but they have to go through hoops to create the same repositories within their firewall and then change them on in the VM. I mean, there's no getting around that.
So the question is there, maybe not for this POC or this release, is there a configurability that we want to put into the V installer to allow it to point at different proxies? Whether that's
David, realistically, the installer should be built through the ON Lab build process and distributed to everybody to use. Right? That's really where it should be built. Where you have access to everything.
But that means it can only, if there is a customer out there, say behind the Great Firewall of China, that wants to build the V installer, they would not have that ability. And this Cord has gone through this, right? That companies in China do not have direct internet access. They can't.
No, but in that case, they download the working installer from they have to get the source code, right? So they must be able to download stuff from ON Lab. All they have to do is download a working installer from ON Lab.
But sometimes they want to install a source code and build things themselves. Okay, I think whether or not the V installer should be able to be built behind, configurable to be more easily built behind firewalls, a decision needs to be made on that, and code needs to change on that. And I don't think we're necessarily going to resolve that here, to be honest.
But it's a configuration issue, right? If you want to be able to build it behind your firewall, then you have to have the apt repository behind your firewall, and you just change the configuration of your VM to go look at your local apt repositories as opposed to the global ones. Pip, you need to recreate the entire pip Python distribution behind your firewall. And I mean, I can keep going.
I get that. The question is, should there be environment settings or parameters or variable settings in a config file or something that allows the process that builds the vInstaller to say, hey, by the way, here's my Ubuntu repository, here's my pip repository, here's my Docker registry.
So from my recollection, the requirement was to be able to run the installer without access to the internet. There was no requirement to be able to build the installer without access to the internet.
Well, it has access. It's proxy access. And that's why I say this is...
Well, then proxy access should work. Why wouldn't that work?
It works, but it requires you to make code changes as opposed to configuration changes in a simple way. And all I'm suggesting is we might want to be able to parameterize the build process such that specifying these proxies or other repositories should be simple.
So I've made a note that it's something we need to talk about for the future, right? So configurations for the environments. Do we mind if it sounds like there is a workaround for this, and it sounds like the current workflow is that the installers are created at the vendor sites. Do you mind if we move on and then pick this up at a later date?
Okay.
So right there. Just one last question: Who's having issues with proxies? Because this is the first I hear of it. Right? We've had this thing running for months. I haven't seen a single Jira on this, so I'd like to know who's having the issue.
So Sergio, we've always run behind proxies, and I did bring this up earlier as well, that what is the solution for running behind proxies? And I was told,
is there a Jira on this? The methodology is not to bring it up in a discussion, it's to raise a Jira.
Right. This was brought up during the architecture meeting, and what I heard was that there is no intent in making Voltha work behind proxies. But for now, let's just table this. This is not something we can discuss right now. We have to go. We will have some changes specific to our proxy environment to build Voltha, and that's something that we'd have to take care of. We've taken care of. That's how we've been building it. Once the vInstaller is built, I think the second question was, which David was trying to say, was that once the vInstaller is built, if we need to make any further changes, code changes like we found a bug and we want to make code changes, we still have to build the images and push the images to the installer via SSH tunnel. Is that your understanding as well, Sergio?
You don't have to rebuild the entire installer if you want to push a patch onto a running cluster.
Right, but you still have to build the images on a development machine, and then through an SSH tunnel, you push the image. So that's the answer to your question, David.
Okay. So the other question was, how do we minimize at the POC the edit, compile, test cycle?
Yeah. So there are tools in the install directory that do that. So as long as you keep the machine, there are 4 machines, right, required for the POC. There's the one you run the installer from and the 3 that are running the cluster. So from the machine that you're running the installer from, you can actually build and push new containers into the cluster. There's tools available in the install directory.
But you don't have to rebuild the installer. I can just rebuild an image and then just...
You can just rebuild one container and push it. There are tools there.
Okay. And will that restart the container on the other side, or just push it to the local registry?
No, then you go to the other side and you either decide to restart the one container or bring down and restart the entire cluster. Okay. It all depends on what container and what the extent of your changes were.
Okay. And that's fine. It's just so we don't have to go through the whole installer rebuild.
You don't.
The real key.
You don't.
Is this documented somewhere?
Exactly. You wouldn't want to do that.
No,
because
no,
that
you
means
wouldn't.
you'd have to reinstall all your servers from scratch in order to rerun the installation, which would not be a good thing.
Yep.
So just a quick check, is everyone aware of the process, or does this need to be documented somewhere?
Everyone on the phone call is aware of the process.
Okay.
But should it be documented? Like,
It should. But if we have higher priority issues right now, then those should take precedence.
yes.
Okay. Let's move on to the next item, if we're okay with that one. So Vol 403, Volta installer fails on latest Volta code base. The update I have is increase the priority as it is blocking integration testing.
So again, we had 2 different people try it Friday, did not run into this. They did run into the 412, which I think was a gRPC issue. Since that's been resolved, I haven't heard anything about this. I tried to get some more information about the environment it was being, this error was occurring in.
What was the issue, David?
Well, in Jira, Satish mentioned that he was having trouble building the installer, and he was getting an error. I asked Ken and Chitin, I think, was to rebuild it. They did it from scratch. Everything worked. Satish still seems to be having an issue building the installer, even on the latest source code after the gRPC bug was patched. So I'm not exactly sure why he's having an issue.
David, Satish here.
Oh, hi.
I've been like facing this issue once in a while, like at least 3 to 4 times out of 5 times we face this issue. I'm not sure what exactly is like going wrong.
So yeah, so the only thing I can relate this to.
The error is an old version of the error I see in 403. Is it Vol 403?
Yes.
That was updated and fixed with Vol 402. There was a Vol 402 that reported the exact same thing, and that was fixed on Thursday or Wednesday of last week.
Actually, we tested it even yesterday. We faced this issue.
So the only time
the error here is losetup.conf, right? Failed. That's been removed. That's not there anymore. You might want to sync your code. In fact, I can go look in the repo right now.
Okay, I'll like look into it.
So,
and still
Satish,
some more issue. Yeah.
I have one question. When you build it, do you always start with a fresh Vagrant VM, or do you reuse the existing one?
Whatever background used for building up Volta, we use the same background image.
Okay. I do want to let you know again that we have seen problems where the dependencies are not very good, and if something changes which has, like, for example, a new package to be downloaded, it doesn't do that automatically. So
we also face similar issues.
So guys, you have to if you pull a new library down, you have to rebuild your Volta VM, either manually or ask the installer to do it. You can't keep reusing the same one. It's not picking up any changes. It's a static VM. It's not a dynamic VM that picks up changes automatically.
Sergio, I think what Satish is trying to say is that if he does pull the code and it does not pip install requirements.txt does not always happen. There are some dependencies that are not proper. If there is a VM,
you have to do a make build.
Even if you do a make build, it doesn't do that. You have to sometimes remove env Linux, or you might have to do pip install requirements.txt manually.
Okay, I've never seen that happen. So to save yourself a lot of trouble, if you've synced the repo, I suggest when you do a create installer, you actually ask it to rebuild the Voltha VM. It'll destroy it and it'll create a whole brand new one and make sure that you've got the latest and greatest stuff on it.
So yeah, Satish, if you try to go with a fresh VM every single time, your chances of it succeeding is better.
No, actually, we every time go in with new VM, but still, like, we face multiple issues. Like, if we have to bring up a cluster, it takes like at least a day. Like, it would fail 3 times, and 4th time
Yes,
we have to
I
bring it
agree.
up.
Yes, I agree. If you have to build everything from scratch, it does take time. Yes.
A whole day? It takes 2 hours to build everything from scratch. So I'm not seeing, I mean, I see this JIRA, I look at the issue that it's reporting, and it's because you're out of sync in the library. I would like to see a lot more JIRAs if there are issues. And I brought this up several times at the TST meetings, that I'm not seeing JIRAs for these issues.
Is Vol 415 related, which is new?
415, let me check.
Four 16 is how to make IGMP proxy work without SSM.
What did you use as a base VM for this? Because did you follow the VM that you tried to run intermittently? So was this on a bare metal host or a
We have faced both on bare metal as well as VM. Like, freshly installed bare metal also, we have faced this issue a couple of times.
Okay, this is not the same. This is not the same issue. So, and you installed 1604 LTS exactly as specified in the documentation?
Yes.
Okay, I'll have to look at this because
I be like occurring every time. Like, we were able to bring up with the same steps the complete installer and bring up the cluster, but once in a while we face this error.
But was this yeah? Do you rerun it on the same machines more than once?
No. Like, from scratch, everything, like building the installer and then reinstalling the operating system on the bare metal host and then deploying the cluster.
Yes. So you repeat this every time, or do you try and rerun the installer on an existing?
We repeat this every time.
Sorry?
We repeat this every time.
So you reinstall Ubuntu 1604 LTS from scratch every time?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I'm going to look at this one. It seems strange that you'd get it intermittently. You should get this all the time if you're getting it. If there's a dependency issue, the error should happen every time, not intermittently. So let me look at it. This is probably a real bug.
So just a reminder that we're trying to track these issues. So by default, you can add them to Volta sprint files. That would make it easier for us to track. I noticed there were a couple of issues that weren't put there.
Yeah, in this case, because it was intermittent, I don't think it was moved. It wasn't. We didn't declare it a blocker, so we didn't move it into Sprint 5. If we think it's a blocker, then it should be moved into Sprint 5. Is that right?
I think at this point we move it by default and then discuss it, and then we can move it out.
All right.
I
Fair
think
enough.
the issue is divisibility, right?
Good. Yep. Yep. That's good. It's a good rule.
Okay, so I think what we heard here was let's retry this. And then Volta build failure on latest master. This being listed as a medium issue. Do we see this as another blocker? It's seen
If there
intermittently.
really is a build failure, I would say, yeah, it's a blocker.
Sounds like it's intermittent.
What's the detail?
Actually, what happens is that if proto files are not properly built or some dependencies are not installed while building Volta, this issue occurs.
So I'm trying to understand this. Why are dependencies not properly installed when building Volta? Why would that happen?
Like it is the Volta build problem.
But okay,
Like,
so
we would like just fix the error and we would run it. But if we have to go through installer, we'll like automated Volta build will initiate. That causes into these issues.
So just to give you an idea, David, today, if we already have a virtual env built, and if someone goes and changes some of the packages, if it's a new package, I guess it's okay. But if it's, say, for example, you have Docker 1604 and you want to change, no, not necessarily Docker, but anything else, if you change it to a different package version or release number, it does not always go and check if there's a difference. All it just looks as if there is a .build inside of venv and then skips it. So that's something in the build process that we have to, I mean, it's a bug, it's still a bug that we have to fix, but it's something in the build process. That's what I think he's referring to as dependencies. So the dependencies are not really checking which versions are needed and all that. It's just checking if there is a virtual env built or not. That's it.
okay. Thanks.
Okay, it sounds like this is a bug and should have a JIRA ticket. Yes?
Yep.
Who is going to submit this?
I'm sorry, what?
There seems to be a JIRA ticket missing for making sure that there is a version check.
Well, and I think what we're seeing is these, like 413 is actually a symptom of that. So you could say 413 is the JIRA to cover this. You know what I'm saying? This is calling out a symptom of it. So I'm not sure we need another JIRA. You could say 413 covers it. If you fix that issue, 413 goes away.
Okay.
The fix for 413 is that check.
Yes.
Sure. So who is going to pick this up as unassigned? And do we consider this a blocker? If we don't consider it a blocker, but there seems to be lots of
there is a
build
workaround.
issues.
Technically, there is a workaround. If you recreate the VM from scratch, that issue is resolved, is my understanding.
The other workaround is to delete the venv and then redo the make build. Yeah.
I guess maybe it's not a blocker because there is a workaround.
What was the other workaround?
Either restart what have you got typed there?
Recreate the VM.
The other one would to destroy the virtual environment venv, and then recreate it. venv, yeah. and then recreate it.
How long does that take?
That shouldn't take too long.
If you're starting afresh, it shouldn't. I mean, for us, it doesn't take that long. I mean, I think it's an order of maybe less than 5 minutes.
Yeah, shorter than recreating the VM.
So potentially, so destroy VENV should be the first one they try, right? If that works, then you don't need to recreate the VM. I mean, is this these two workaround in sequence, or is?
Oh,
I mean, we don't destroy the VMs because we don't use Vagrant. To be honest, we have VMs that for developers, and we don't want to destroy that because there are other things in there too. So what we typically do when we run into issues, and we have run into this issue several times, is we try to first run pip install requirements.txt, because that's missing. It doesn't happen, and that's why you're running into this issue. So sometimes it resolves itself, sometimes it doesn't. We haven't gotten to the bottom of it. And then if it does, then we just delete or remove the virtual env inside of your code incubator Voltha, and then do the make build again, which will actually look for all the installs that you need and requirements, and then install them. So that typically helps. Within less than 5 minutes, you should be able to get that. I mean, destroying the VM, I mean, if it's a Vagrant VM, which is just used for Voltha, that's fine, but I'm not sure if everybody does it that way. We could be using developer VMs, or you could be running it in bare metal, so you can't really always destroy the VM, right? So, yeah.
The purpose behind a Vagrant VM, right, is really to make sure all developers are on a standard development machine, so that when bugs are reported, you have a consistent base that everybody's going off of. So
right.
that's kind of the value of it. So
that's right.
there is a lot more troubleshooting that has to be done when that Vagrant VM isn't being used for development, because all of a sudden there are external environment issues at play that have to be resolved, and that's takes a little more triage before bugs say that everybody's seen it.
Right, and I don't think it's you know, this has happened in the Vagrant environment as well. It's not just in the non-Vagrant.
Okay, so it sounds like we have a workaround. I'll flag this as not a blocker, but something we need to address as part of the next maintenance.
I think 1.1 probably too soon. Potential 1.2.
1.1.1?
Huh?
1.1.1?
1.1, I think probably too soon, right? Because that's September 18th.
No, 1.1.1.
Oh,
So
1.1.1.
Yeah, that's our main.
1.1.1. Did I capture 1.1.1?
It's in the version list.
Okay. Right, 1.1.1.
Or I can do 1.1.x.
X, yeah.
Gives us a fudge factor. Okay. So I will move this to the backlog. I'll tag it later. Now we're at 4:14. Console. Failed to wait for barrier. Node is not the leader. Agent failed to sync remote state to no cluster leader.
This issue is a blocker for 1.0. I haven't like faced any issues with console like last week, but couple of days before, like I'm like facing this issue.
So the cluster is not forming?
Yeah, only in a console cluster I face this issue. I'm not sure if others are facing the same issue, but today we brought in 2 clusters setups independently. Like on both setups, we had this issue.
So who is assigned to this? And is anyone
Well,
else
for
seeing
now,
this issue?
assign it to me.
Sorry, who spoke?
Sergio.
Ah, okay. I'm still trying to identify voices. Recorder, assignee. Where am
Do you have more information than just the sparse logs you pasted in here?
Yes, I'll share it. I'll include a complete log file and then I'll include it in the Jira.
Okay.
Okay, next item. Intermittently, installer fails if the step-dependent software is installed.
That's the same one. That's 415.
Yeah, we talked about that one earlier.
Yeah.
Related to 403 or not related to 403. We talked about it in the same time frame.
And who's picking this up?
Oh, I am.
That was Sergio again?
Yep.
And then we considered this a blocker?
Well, it depends on whether or not if you restart the cluster and the problem keeps happening, it's a blocker. If you restart the cluster and the problem goes away, then it's not a blocker. And I don't know which of the two applies right now.
I don't think so. This is a blocker.
Yeah, I would say typically a console sometimes comes up in a funny state. And you know, we've done a lot of work to find the version that does that as little as possible. But every once in a while, you trip over console coming up wrong, and the only solution, and you'll see it right up front. You restart the cluster, and then after that, it just runs nice and stable without any issues. So it has a workaround. You have to do a Voltha swarm stop, wait for everything to come down, and then redo a Voltha swarm start. And you know, usually console will come up just fine the second time around. Other issues that you could run into is that actually Docker Swarm came up crooked, and if that happens, then you'll know right away, because no matter how many times you try and start the Voltha, you're going to get console not being able to elect a leader. In which case you have to reboot all the servers in the cluster and then start it. And at that point, Docker Swarm will come up okay, and then everything runs fine. So there are some quirks with Swarm and with console. Console we have a solution for, or we will, for Volta 1. Or 2.0. But for Swarm, it's probably going to be the use of Kubernetes and moving to Kubernetes and drifting away from Swarm for Volta 2 as well.
Okay, so we're considering this not a blocker.
Unless someone tells me that it doesn't come up every time, then no, it's not a blocker. I think this is an intermittent issue that's related to console, and we've been waiting and checking the news feeds to see if they've solved it. It's gotten a lot more solid, but it's not perfect.
Okay, next, how to make IGMP proxy work without SSM.
Hi, this is Amit. I did raise this issue. So it's first of all, it's not a blocker. So the issue out here is that when the RGs would send the joins, they will not. That's what we observed in POC2, that they don't send the source addresses, and the IGMP proxy app that is there right now that expects the SSL translations to be present when the source address is not present. So what I really want to understand is basically from the authors of the app, how is it intended to work?
So Amit, I was just looking at your email that you sent this morning. I don't think we need the SSM translate. We've never used the SSM translate even in POC2. You know, if you can tell us exactly what issue you're running into, then, I mean, I looked at your JSON that I'm not sure who's added in the code tester, but anyway, we do need the uplink configuration. That's fine. I don't know why you need the suppression stuff. We never needed it for the LLDP. You could take that out. You need the IGMP configuration up to whatever information that you want to specify there in terms of, like, what your timeouts have to be. This is all depending on your setup. That's all okay, but you don't really need the SSM translate part in there. So, and then what you would need is the ingress VLAN, and the egress VLAN as a part of the ingress VLAN could be 0. You don't really use that, and egress VLAN is what is important, which is your multicast VLAN, and that should be enough. And we've tested that in POC2. So I would suggest to try with that first and see if.
Yeah, so certainly in that case, we can work over emails on this.
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
Okay, but I'm hearing it's not a blocker.
Yeah, it's not a blocker.
I mean, how about going through the Voltha discuss email so everybody can see it?
Yeah, Sean, definitely.
Okay, I'll move it out, and then let's take a look at where we're currently at with everything else and get a feel for where we're really at, right? So we've got 411, 400, 401, 403, and 414. 414 is noted as 4 story points, which is getting us closer to, we're looking at 3 days or so. But that was right without the assignee having taken a look at it. So do we have a feel for where we're at with the release? Because I see the same name on a few of these, right? So we're depending on a limited set of folks to fix these. Actually, the good news is...
414 is not a blocker, right?
Which one?
414.
I think what I heard from
It is a blocker.
Satish was that he considered it a blocker. So unless...
Oh, I'm asking, I'll ask again. If you restart the cluster, does the problem reoccur?
Yes. Like I've killed all containers and just run console alone. Still, I face this issue.
Did you reboot the machines in the cluster to make sure that Swarm had actually come up okay?
Yeah.
And when you actually start the cluster, don't manually try and start containers. But when you do a Voltha Swarm stop to stop the cluster, and then a Voltha Swarm start, does the problem happen again?
When we do an Voltha swarm start, what happens is that console comes up and the leader is elected, and it went through that. Like a leader is selected, after that the leader connection is lost, and it goes for a re-election, and this loop continues.
So that indicates that there's a that's why I'm asking you if you rebooted the 3 servers in the cluster to make sure that you've got Docker Swarm running correctly, and that there are no network issues between the servers.
Yes. Yeah, even after restarting all the 3 bare metal nodes, we still have this issue.
Okay. So has anybody else seen it? I just want to confirm that this is, because I don't want to go on I don't want to put this in as a critical issue if we're not seeing it anywhere else. I don't see it. So is anyone else seeing the issue? And I've had a cluster running now for 5 days, nonstop.
And Sergio, is your cluster is 3 bare metal or all 3 VMs?
3 VMs, but we also have a bare metal installation, which I'm going to get started today. I'm going to fire it up today and deploy Voltha on it, and I'm going to leave that one running as a soak. And the soak I've been running actually has 1,500 OLTs instantiated. It's not just a plain vanilla, Voltha with nothing on it. It's got 1,500 OLTs, and I've been checking it many times a day to make sure that it's up and running, and I can send curl requests to it and get responses back on all the devices. So that's why I'd like to know: is this something everybody's seeing, or is this just happening in this one deployment? Because I'm not going to call it a blocker if it's only happening in one place, and then what we need to do is get to the bottom of why it's happening there.
I suspect is maybe most of people still running as a development mode, has not run as a production mode.
Is Chitvan still on the call, or did he drop? Okay. Chitvan on our team has a 3 server cluster. I don't know if he's still on, because he could tell us whether he's seeing the problem or not. I'll talk to him. Leave it as blocking for now, and I'll go. I've got access to 2 bare metal clusters, so I'm going to deploy it on the 2 bare metal clusters here and see if I see the issue. The only times I've seen persistent console issues is when Docker Swarm was actually badly initialized and you had to restart the server for it to initialize correctly. But it could be something else. I'll check.
And you also said this issue come with the swarm, so there's nothing we can do about it, or?
Well, restart the servers so swarm comes up clean, right?
Okay.
So so you restart the 3 servers. Then once console actually establishes its leadership and it's running, it doesn't act funny. It only acts funny when it's coming up. And the whole reason why we wait for console to elect a leader is because if you start asking it to do stuff before it elects its leader, there are more chances that it will not function correctly until leadership is established. But I've had this going. I'm soak testing now, right? I want to make sure that this runs for a long period of time without needing to reboot servers and restart processes. And as far as I can tell, in my 3 VM setup, it's working fine. I'm going to try bare metal servers next and make sure that it's also working fine on bare metal servers. It could be a networking issue, right, on that server cluster or something of that nature. So get me as many logs as you can for that issue, please, so that I can take an in-depth look at what's going on.
Yes, sure. I'll even check and then I'll provide you all the logs.
Okay, thanks.
So it looks like 2 new issues just came in. I think the ask was to please put it in Sprint 5. So please do that next time. I will put in sprint 5 and then we'll review.
Yeah, that one's mine. I asked my guys to raise that one. It's a configuration issue.
Let's go through it real quick. Let me edit this one also. I was just told this one was a blocker, so we'll go through it real quick. And
yeah, that's symptomatic of not having followed the documentation. Somebody asked me about that already. So let me find out why.
Okay, let's go over.
Typically, it's a misconfiguration of Ansible. There is a step, there is an Ansible config file you have to have in your environment, and if you don't, you run into that problem. So I'll read it carefully. Assign that one to me as well, and I'll read it carefully, and then I will reply with what the gap in the procedure is.
418. Sergio?
Yeah, sorry?
We're talking about 418?
Yeah, 418, assign it to me.
And then do we agree this is a blocker until you document what the gaps are?
So yeah, just so you know, without this, we're not able to create the fresh install, and then if we want to try everything from scratch, then we are not able to get to the next step of deploying the stack and testing other scenarios. So I would consider that a blocker.
Okay.
So Sarisha, though, you guys ran the installer before, without an issue, right?
Yes, we ran the installer, but we just wanted to do it from scratch again, and that's when we ran those issues. It's not the first time.
Yeah. So there's an Ansible config file that needs to be set exactly as per the running the installer documentation that's in the source tree. And if you miss that step, you're going to have this issue. So let me go look. I'll find the exact clause in the installation instructions, and I'll post them in the Jira.
Okay. Yeah, I believe we followed that. But yeah, sure.
If you manage to run it before without having this issue, then I'm almost positive it's pointing at that one missing config step, which is the .ansible.config file. I'll post instructions in the Jira if I think that's it.
Okay, so hopefully this is a quick fix, and then we also have one more new issue that came in, which is 417. Proto file names have been changed to camel case for various attributes in REST call.
Yeah, I said earlier, just assign that one to me.
It is assigned to you.
Okay, so good.
Do we consider this a blocker?
It might be for some people who've written an exorbitant amount of curl commands using the underscores as opposed to camel case. So I'm going to change the config so that this behaves.
What's camel case? Tell them.
Camel case is uppercasing the letters of the different words as opposed to putting an underscore between them.
Oh, okay.
So Protobuf supports both, and in fact, it carries both in the proto descriptions. And depending on how you configure the client, you can tell it to use either the camel case or the value that was in the proto description with underscores. So it's a one Boolean change in a config file.
So this should be fast.
This is very quick. Yeah, I've already got it done. All I have to do is push an update.
Has anybody started using camel case for a while now? It's broken.
Well, so I don't think a lot of people have been doing a lot of script writing, but if somebody has and you think this is going to break you, then let me know. But I don't think it will.
Okay.
Okay, so we're down to 7 issues. Do we have a feel for when we think these will be done?
Maybe Thursday.
Yeah, we rescheduled our release planning for Thursday, so hopefully we'll be done then. Let's do this. We have another call tomorrow. It's the adapter one, but we'll do a quick sync up on this, see where we're at, and then we'll continue to look through the adapter issues and see where we're at with those.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Appreciate everybody's help. I should, yeah. It's almost there. I think Guru already let the new head of the ONF know it's any day now. So appreciate that. I appreciate everybody working on this. Okay.
So we'll continue monitoring. Hopefully we can get this done sometime this week. As folks get more ideas of where they're at with issues, please update the story points to accurately reflect what amount of time we're looking at, or an ETA for each of the issues you're seeing. Otherwise, right, we're just going to keep bugging you. So, okay.
And then we still have the meeting this afternoon, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Sean, you have a couple of minutes?
I do. Okay.
Okay.
Do you want to call me?
Yeah, I'll send you my mobile number. How's that?
That would be great. Thanks.